Welcome to Contemporary Issues with Dr. Brovkin. Today I'd like to talk about the summit of NATO in Washington, the big picture. What I noticed in most of the commentaries about the summit of NATO in Washington is a small picture. People were talking about all kinds of little details. Some of them are funny, such as when President Biden introduced the president of Ukraine, President Putin. That slip of the tongue may actually be prophetic. Who knows? Maybe in some time in the future, it's Putin who is going to be the president of Ukraine. And then there were other ones when he started talking about the wife of Stoltenberg and said something indecent. And then when he tried to kiss Prime Minister Meloni, and then she tried to avoid it and just kind of pushed back. All these little things, but that's not the big picture. The big picture is the historical significance of this NATO summit, and I have pointed out to six of the most important takeaway issues on which I'd like to comment specifically one by one. So, what are these things? Number one, 40 billion to Ukraine. Number two, Ukraine will be a NATO member. Number three, Russia will be defeated. That's number three, will be NATO member. Number two. Number four, Russia is number one enemy and Russia is an aggressor. This is something that's not new, it's been repeated over and over. Most important is number five, which is a bilateral agreement between Germany and the United States that the intermediate range missiles will be placed in Germany facing Russia by 2026. That's number five. And number six, NATO's claim that it will be expanded to the Pacific region, and NATO's claim to be kind of a worldwide organization with new allies of AUKUS and Japan and South Korea to defend against Russian-Chinese aggression in the Far East. So these are the 6 points. Let me comment about each of those one by one. So number one, 40 billion to Ukraine. That's in addition to the 60 billion that the United States voted for in the spring. And that's in addition to 7 from Sweden and then some more from various other countries. So is that a lot? Yes, it is a lot. But let me just remind you that Ukraine's economy is in ruins. And it's totally sold to BlackRock and other Western owners. And 40 billion is actually enough to run Ukraine for 4 months. That's what it is. It needs about 10 billion a month to sustain its war effort and just a little bit for civilian expenditure. And it doesn't generate much at all. And what it does generate is a lot of it is stolen through the corruption deals of all kinds, and there's all kinds of details that I have no time to go into, who owns what and where. So 40 billion is a lot, but it's not going to make a big dent in Ukraine's war effort. So number two, Ukraine will be a NATO member and it will defeat Russia. This is quite an arrogant statement given the reality on the ground, and that is that it's clear to most observers Ukraine cannot win over Russia. It cannot, even with NATO full participation, simply because continental armies do not exist in Europe to the way in such a capacity as to face Russian army. And if they go nuclear, then it would be a devastation of European civilization. Nobody wants that. So this is impossible. The claim that Ukraine will defeat Russia is absolutely ridiculous and unattainable. Now, why are they doing it? Are they stupid? No, they're not. Why are they saying this? I think that they dream of 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed and Russia was weak, and they defined it as a victory in the Cold War. Now, that's the biggest delusion that they have. In 1991, what happened was not the Western victory in the Cold War, but it was the collapse of the communist regime in Russia. And it was Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus together that walked out of the Soviet Union on their own accord. it was because they embraced the values which at that time were called all human values of democracy, human rights, market economy. That this embrace was interpreted by the West in the biggest historical mistake it ever made as a defeat of Russia. Russia was not defeated, it walked out of communism, of the Soviet Union. And strictly speaking, if one day Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus decided to create a new union or to restore the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics for whatever reason, they have full right to do so. There's no international treaty like after World War I that prescribe their borders. They are free to choose whichever borders they want between themselves. There's nothing on the way except the Budapest Memorandum, which was conditioned on friendship and cooperation between Russia, open frontiers, and non-aligned status. Once Ukraine decided to join NATO, all of that is off the boards, including the borders. Now, next point, Russian aggression thesis. Even the well-wishers, even those who want to create peace and negotiations still repeat Russian aggression, 2022. So let me just one more time expose the facts as they are. If you shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot, one day those you shoot at are going to respond. And this is what happened in Donbass. 2014, there was a coup d'etat supported by the United States, and the new people who came to power as a result of that coup d'etat wrote in the constitution that Russia is out, US is in, and it's going to be by constitution a member of NATO. The previous decision was the NATO decision of 2008 that Ukraine will become NATO. So the government that was formed was of extreme nationalists that are called Banderavites, named after Stepan Bandera, who was a Nazi collaborator who wrote the letter to Hitler, who was guilty and his people of endless crimes against humanity and war crimes and execution of the Jews, etc., etc., etc. In other words, this was the government that the United States supported and still supports in terms of confrontation with Russia. Now, Donbass said no, Crimea said no to this government, and Russia decided to support them, but didn't hurry to incorporate them into Russia except Crimea. And for 8 years, Putin was saying there's no alternative to Minsk Accords, which was an attempt to keep those territories in Ukraine in exchange for their autonomous status and in exchange for Ukraine not being a member of NATO, as Russia perceived it as a threat to its security. So, in January 2022, if you look at the documents, this is not my opinion, these are facts. The Ukrainian side intensified shelling. Now we know that there was huge supply of ammunition in December and January 2021, and they started shooting and shooting and shooting until they provoked a shoot back. And this is what's called Russian aggression. So the United States provoked Russia because they wanted to defeat it, and at that time they believed they could do it. At that time they believed they could defeat Russia strategically. They announced it publicly. They thought Russia would break up. Russia was weak. Russia was in no match to the mighty United States that controlled the world. This was their biggest mistake, because in the years that came since then, Russia restored its Soviet-based military industry, and now it is militarily unassailable, unwinnable, except by nuclear exchange. So, the notion that Russia committed an aggression is false. From the very beginning, it was a matter of NATO expansion pinned on Russia as an aggression. Now we go to the next point, which is bilateral agreement between Germany and the United States. What's most important here is that it was a bilateral agreement between Germany and the United States. In other words, I wonder what legal experts would say. If it is a bilateral agreement, are other members of NATO committed by its provisions. In other words, the United States missiles are placed in Germany. Suppose there is a conflict and these missiles fly and hit Russia, and Russia destroys these bases in Germany, hits them back. U.S. extraterritorial bases in Germany. Does that mean that it's an attack on Germany and all other countries in NATO are automatically at war with Russia? I seriously doubt that. I doubt that many countries subscribe to that. I doubt very much that many of them, I don't want to list them by one, you all know, those who follow politics would say, wait a second, we didn't subscribe to this. We did not subscribe to war with Russia because America chose to put intermediate missiles in Germany. Now, the history of these missiles, of course, is very, very interesting. In 1987, President Reagan and Secretary Gorbachev signed a intermediate missiles ban treaty, which eliminated this category of weapons. And this was a sigh of relief of many Europeans at that time. Now, all of a sudden, United States brings them back unilaterally behind the backs of its NATO, quote, allies, with Germany, with Scholz, who has no authority whatsoever to do it. The parliament doesn't have any discussion on this. It's not even clear if Bundestag is going to approve it. It's a big, big threat to peace in Europe, and it's done behind the backs of the so-called NATO meeting. The new forces are gathering in Europe, and that would be a subject of great discussion later on. But the point is that this kind of globalist, imperialist agenda of expanding NATO over and over, and even now the latest decision to Asia, blaming China for trading with Russia, this may backfire because there are new forces that you could see visible in Europe. On the old forces are those that are Russophobic, who hate Russia, who want to destroy it, who want to provoke it, who want to expand NATO forever, and who hoped that during using Ukraine, they will win over Russia. Now they failed, and now they want to expand it even more. But the new forces are represented by Prime Minister Orban of Hungary, Fish of Slovakia, and there you have already an alliance between Hungary and Serbia, kind of the axis of resistance to the globalist agenda. And then there's quite close to it is neutral Austria, and in the same direction, one could say politics is moving in Germany, in Bulgaria, and many other countries. Of course, Marine Le Pen in France, I remember she said that when she grew up, Crimea was Russian, and she had no problem with that. And she and her party are obviously for a peaceful resolution and negotiated settlement of Ukraine war. In other words, the new forces in Europe are labeled by the globalist imperialists as fascist and nationalist and right-wing and all that stuff, especially Alternative for Germany. Now, when you listen to them objectively, there's nothing fascist about them and nothing nationalist. These are the people who want the following. They want to defend their borders. They want to limit or stop immigration, uncontrollable immigration. They want to preserve their Christian heritage. They want to preserve a traditional family, a man, a woman, and a child, which is pretty much normal. They can't say that's extremist, can you? And who want to have normal relations with Russia. That is called extremist in the agenda of the globalist imperialists led by United States today under Biden, the Democrats. Interestingly enough, there's the same kind of forces in the United States. They limit immigration. They want to restore traditional values. They want to ban abortion. They want to have normal relations of Russia, and they want to stop the expansion of NATO. So new winds are blowing in Europe and the United States, and we shall see how it will play out. But as far as this meeting of NATO leaders, it has shown arrogance. It has shown no change of course, expansion of NATO, continuation of the war. defeating Russia, unattainable goals, which the higher, my point is, the higher they raise the stakes, the more painful will be the collapse or the disillusionment or reform or simply breakup of NATO. And finally, I want to remind you that as far as the early stages of Russian foreign policy and interaction with the West, and the rise of opposition forces, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the rise of Putin, you can read about this in my book featured here, and that is From Vladimir Lenin to Vladimir Putin. The book published by Routledge in London. I'll see you next time. Thank you, goodbye, and subscribe to my channel.